We had better turnover. We attained ISO 27001 accreditation. We have improved production and yield. We have had many internal promotions. We have added some significant new roles to the business. And all of this was an organic process. It wasn't driven from a desire to improve sickness management per se, but a desire to make things better. Yes, for the business, obviously, but mostly for everyone working for the business, because without those people doing well, then the business isn't going to thrive.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Across the Table podcast with me, Joe Perry. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by longtime friends and collaborator, Deb Rees, for the first in a series of podcasts looking at practical conversations on trust, engagement, solving issues at work, and really focusing on the experience of SMEs. Working as the standalone HR person is a difficult gig, and when Deb arrived at LSN Diffusion, absence was nearly 6%. Within a year, it was down to 2%. Even after a small bump recently, it's around 3.5%. In addition, turnover has fallen from 33% to just over 7%, and we'll be looking at what they did, how it worked, and what other SMEs may be able to copy tomorrow. Deb has also been engaged with the current Keep Britain Working Review, led by Charlie Mayfield, the former chairman of the John Lewis Partnership, and the early work on Charlie's review spotlights early support and employer capability, and we're aiming to share what actually works on the ground. SMEs are a vital part of the economy. There's over 5 million SMEs employing nearly 17 million people, making up 99% of all businesses in the UK and 60% of private sector employment. So they are massive and they are a really important part of the wider economy. So Deb, welcome and thank you for agreeing to join us to talk about this.
Hi, Joe. It's lovely to catch up again as always. And I think you are absolutely right. SME HR is definitely worth a bit of a deep dive here today. But before we get stuck in, I would just like to clearly state that I am not an expert, far from it. And LSN has as many areas of weakness as it does areas of strength. We are learning all the time. A bit about me. I've worked in HR for around 20 years, spanning the public sector, the private sector, the third sector. I've specialised in equality and diversity. I've specialised in employment law for a while, and I've actually taught on the CIBD course as well. I'm currently the HR manager at LSN Diffusion Limited, a manufacturing SME that produces brazing alloys in South Wales for global use.
Perfect. Thanks, Deb. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this takes us. So let's jump in and hear more about what you're doing with the team there. So the first area I wanted to look at was really just to get a bit more from you about what's brilliant, but also really hard about SME HR and what's the most rewarding part of working in HR at an SME.
Well, I absolutely love my job, for the most part anyway, for a number of reasons. I have full autonomy, I can directly influence positive change, and the results of that can usually be seen pretty quickly. It is a very dynamic environment, so change is a constant, and the pace of change is very fast. But beyond all of that, I love the calibre of people that you get in manufacturing. They're mostly gritty doers, and I just feel like I can come to work, be myself, and do what I do. There is a real family feel where I work.
I'm a big fan of gritty doers, really pleased to hear that. But can you give me an example of something that you can implement on a Monday morning, which a really big company corporate can't?
Sure. We can and have decided to change a shift pattern, for example. And whilst we give people a month's notice, we are small enough just to have those discussions with people. And if everyone's in agreement, then we can make that change immediately. We've also made instant decisions to pay for medical services where long-serving members of staff have needed that. And we've also made instant decisions to give someone a loan, for example, to help them out of a tough spot. So being small, we've been able to do that without too much discussion or debate or change in policies. Those are the kinds of decisions we can just make straight away.
I mean, you sort of mentioned about the sort of family feel, and I was just thinking, where does that sort of proximity or family feel help most from an engagement point of view?
Well, when I say we're like a family, I really do mean that. And like all families, we have ups and downs. So when it has helped us most, I'd say that without question, our employees get when the market changes and the business has been really up against the wall. And in those situations, they have rolled up their sleeves and done whatever it has taken to get the business through. So examples of that would have been during COVID, during the Ukraine conflict, which caused supply chain difficulties for us, back when inflation was really squeezing our margins. The downside being when people have very close working relationships, they are very emotionally invested, and it can therefore be very emotionally charged if someone feels let down by another. And it does happen. Trust me, it happens quite a bit. But I think, yeah, that's where this real family feel comes into play in our business.
And all families have their ups and downs, as we all know. So it sounds like a really interesting dynamic that you've got there. I was sort of, as you were talking, I was reflecting on the sort of friends and family point. And one of the things that I've come back to in my time in HR has been that more and more friends and family have been asking me about situations at work. So whether it's redundancy, disciplinary performance, it's a really nice thing to be able to help out. And I think that's something that I've always felt has been important to me, is helping people at work, whether I'm working with them directly or not. And I think the other part of that is when I originally did my law degree, the thing that I really identified with was employment law, because it was people's lives on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis. It was your mum, your brother, your best friend. So for me, that was always a really important part of this, was the impact you can have on a day-to-day basis for people, because work is important and it affects your life outside as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely get that, Joe. HR and DR allow you to help people at a time when, potentially their life can be completely unraveling, be that personally or in the workplace. And if you think about it, employment affects everything, doesn't it? It affects their security and their feelings of security, their mental health, and ultimately whether they keep a roof over their head. So I too love being able to help people in that way. And I never lose sight of how important work is for all of us.
And I think that you sort of mentioned mental health there, which segues nicely into my next question. So I mentioned about the Keep Britain Working review and the work of Charlie Mayfield, and the discovery work that they've done as part of that review underscores some of the things that every organization can do. Early contact, better line management, confidence, faster return to work. And with these, we're looking forward to the gloomy months of the year.
Yeah.
So there's going to be an increase in absenteeism as the nights draw in. There's more viruses going around. How have you sort of thought about this at LSN, and how have you managed it in the past?
So when I joined LSN around 3.5 years ago, sickness was running at 6% and costing the business £112,000 a year. Over a period of 12 months, by following a systemic approach, we managed to get that sickness down to 2%. So it was then costing around 35k, where it mostly sat for the following 2 years. In the last few months, we have seen a small spike, and that is in line with the CIPD research, which came out last month to state that sickness across the UK is running at a 15-year high. So with us at its worst this year, it climbed back up to about 3.5%. And many of the mid-management team and myself started to feel a bit despondent about that. But then we reminded ourselves that actually we have a very generous sickness policy. And it's just unfortunate that this year we've had 3 employees off on long-term sick, very genuine situations that we've helped them with. And if we take a step back and look at things holistically, we are doing great. Our sickness is well under control. Our turnover has reduced from 33%, which is what it was at its worst, to 7.5%. All of our mid and senior management have upskilled in the last 3 years. Everyone has had very decent pay rises year on year. We paid out our first cash bonus this year. And all of this at a time when, let's face it, the macro environment is pretty tough out there, particularly for manufacturing. So sickness management is just part of that puzzle. And I actually think when a workforce has got behind your direction of travel as well as LSN staff have, you would be foolish not to expect a bit of fatigue and a bit of burnout to start creeping in. And it's then time to spot that and take action to be supportive. So we've done that by increasing our headcount and investing in technology to ease some of those pressure points. So sickness and absence is an area I feel very passionate about, as it is an area of low-hanging fruit in a business sense, but also an area where you can really impact employees' lives at a time when they are going through a tough spot. So as you mentioned, the Mayfield review there, we took part in that work. So Sir Charlie Mayfield spearheaded the Keep Britain Working review, and we attended their Cardiff workshop to feed directly into that work, and that was really interesting. So the results of that are out soon, and I would urge people to have a look into that.
Sounds like a fantastic opportunity to sort of get involved with some really important proactive work. And I think one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast is sharing some of those practical tips and hints that people can implement. And you talked about how you moved sickness absence from 6% to 2% and then with a little increase. So how did you do that? And how did you keep people with the business as you were going on that journey?
So firstly, I did a cost analysis for SMT to get them on board. Then I rewrote our sickness policy, and we used Daniel Barnett for our policy templates, which are absolutely fantastic and I highly recommend. They can be found at www.danielbarnett.com. I then delivered training to all the managers to get their buy-in. And whilst this was going on, we also invested very heavily in training and development right across the business. So colleagues started to build knowledge of the impact of strategic decisions and the role that they play in executing those decisions. Then I rolled out the sickness policy training to all staff. And at the same time as this, our ops director started to foster better collaboration with his direct reports and build a culture of data analysis within his teams. So we then set revised monthly KPIs, and we obviously made sickness and absence key KPIs and part of that. After 12 months, we communicated the savings to everyone, and I then wrote a performance policy with the input from the workforce, and we rolled out an individual performance-related pay structure. So that's now in its second year. And in the third year of that sickness analysis, we introduced a performance-related cash bonus as well. So that's on top of our annual pay reviews. So sickness management is just part of the picture. We had better turnover. We attained ISO 27001 accreditation. We have improved production and yield. We have had many internal promotions. We have added some significant new roles to the business. And all of this was an organic process. It wasn't driven from a desire to improve sickness management per se, but a desire to make things better. Yes, for the business, obviously, but mostly for everyone working for the business, because without those people doing well, then the business isn't going to thrive. And we did some quirky things along the way. So we offered factory floor workers the opportunity to be part of a draw for cash prizes of £300 if they wrote a review on their favourite learning resource. And we were absolutely shocked when people got engaged with that. So that was something that we did. We did on-site barbecues, 26-mile hikes, mountain walks, coastal walks. I'm constantly trying to think of things to improve the work experience for staff, which in turn improves business performance. But to summarise, I think the biggest change in relation to sickness management is the honesty of the impact that it has on your business. And what we did was thread that through all of our conversations, both vertically and horizontally across the organisation. So that message became embedded across the whole business about the impact of sickness and what we could do to improve it.
I absolutely love those examples, Deb. It's like practical stuff that people can get engaged with, and the transparency. It feels like that's a really important point, because I think absence can often be a proxy for other conflict.
Absolutely.
So if people aren't happy about other things at work, it can manifest as time off. And sometimes that time off is labeled as cough, cold, flu when it's actually about something else. And if you don't have the honesty and the trust and the engagement, you can't put the right support measures in place. And when it's done badly, it causes more problems. So having that transparency, the discussions that you're clearly engaged with the workforce, and a structure and a process, but also the flexibility to be able to do things when you need to, sounds like it's really working for you. And I think some organizations also forget that actually this is about supporting people. It's not about being punitive. And it sounds like you've got a really good balance.
Yeah, and that's a really important point that you make there, because done badly is also relative. So we have an example of this now. We've got an employee who is currently off on long-term sick due to a horrific accident that his wife had on holiday. I've been in regular contact with that person, but his line manager didn't want to be seen to pester him in the early weeks, so did not contact him directly, thinking the last thing the person needed was the line manager badgering them at home. But the individual was quite hurt by this, until I explained that in trying to be kind, the line manager had inadvertently come across as uncaring. So it's important to remember that when an employee is absent from work, have had a traumatic experience, they have all day, every day to think about that. For colleagues at work, the days fly by as usual. So people can be in a very different headspace when they're off and also when they return. And that takes a sympathetic approach in order to avoid a conflict situation brewing like you've spoke about.
I mean, it's really important, putting yourself in someone else's shoes in those situations is a really effective way to sort of build that empathy, I think. So it sounds like you've really struck a great balance there. Moving on, because we've known each other for quite a few years, and over the time we've been chatting and talking about the random HR issues that come up. I know that professional development and lifelong learning has been an area that you're really passionate about. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and where that comes from?
Yeah. So I started work when I was 15, and I soon progressed to working full-time and having 2 part-time jobs. But I wanted to get a horse, so I looked in the newspapers to see what sort of job could I get that would allow me to get a horse. And I was drawn to HR. Within my first year of working in HR, I told my manager that I wanted to do the CIPD course, and he said, absolutely not. It's not required at your level. So I pretty much said goodbye to them. I left and I worked somewhere else and did my CIPD. And I bought my horse in year 2. Um, and I still have a horse today. After the CIPD, I wanted to specialise in employment law because I found that area fascinating, like yourself. So I told my manager of my plans, and again, they said it's not really needed at your level, so we won't be able to support that. So I said, that's fine, absolutely fine. I paid for semester 1 of that course and enrolled on an employment law master's. And I was the only person on that course to achieve a commendation from the whole group. And throughout the course, I brought back practical learning, some employment law templates and things back to my workplace. And my employers subsequently paid for that entire course. So where my passion for lifelong learning and professional development comes from is it was those qualifications that allowed me to walk back into the profession after taking a 5-year career break and not putting my laptop on for 5 years. So it has given me security, it has opened doors for me, and it has always allowed me to grow. In terms of LSN, when I joined, the only training that took place was mandatory training. In the 3.5 years I've been there, we have given every single employee the opportunity to engage with training and development. We have done internal training, external training, professional courses, brought in mentors. I have done coaching. We've had an online learning platform called Bookboon, which was excellent. So every single employee has had the opportunity to engage in self-directed development. And this brought about a culture shift and professionalised the workforce. There is still work to be done, don't get me wrong, and both myself, the MD and the rest of the SMT are fully on board with lifelong learning and driving that forward, and it's a permanent feature of our business plan. And I know you've been on a tremendous journey of learning and growth yourself, Joe. Talk us through some of what that has involved for you and what's the next challenge.
But before I do that, I think it's one of the things you've said really sparked a thought for me, which was around applying things practically in the workplace from that learning. And I think that is
Yeah.
so important, and some great examples there of how you've been able to do that. Personally, I've just finished a coaching qualification, which has been fantastic. Really enjoyed it. I actually need to finish off the dissertation element of it, so that's what I'll be doing over the next couple of weekends. But on top of that, we also started this podcast and doing some work with Collaborate ER to try and raise awareness around the things that the practical things that organizations can do to help with conflict, collaboration in the workplace. Got a newsletter across the table with myself, Joe Perry. We'll include
Brilliant.
the links to those in the comments below. And I think then when I'm looking forward, I always want to have something on the horizon. And so been looking at sort of trauma-informed support and investigations and how you factor that into your engagement with staff where there has been, some really difficult incidents in the workplace and also potentially outside the workplace, and how you adapt your approach to factor in that trauma in the process. So it's really interesting stuff, and there's loads to get into there, and I'm looking forward to looking into that in a bit more depth.
Yeah. And I think the coaching is very powerful. When I did a coaching qualification, it was that which I think gave rise to my complete shift in career planning. So it made me curious enough to move away from my corporate job and take a career break to be a mum. So if anyone out there embarks on professional coaching, just be prepared for where it may take you, I'd say.
And I mentioned about having things on the horizon. And I'm always the sort of person who takes on lots of things and then juggles and manages. But I think there is a point there which leads us into the sort of next question about avoiding overwhelm. And I know a lot of people working in HR who are grappling with stressful jobs, the emotional burden of the issues that you need to deal with, long hours. So what tips have you got for avoiding any of those pitfalls and staying energized and focused?
Um, Firstly, I'd say be really, really in tune with what is your sector, your size, your resources, your culture, and your business plan. Then be honest about what works for you and what doesn't. For example, we don't bother doing exit interviews at LSN. We are small enough to pretty much know our people, and to undertake that task is time, it's admin, it's more GDPR fining, etc. So we just don't bother with that. We also take imperfect action. So, for example, I mentioned earlier our performance review process. We drafted that individual performance related pay review process. We released a pilot, then tweaked it, and then we just ran with it. And we will likely just tweak it as we go. Also, be smart about what's out there already. So we use yourself and Professor Saundry for our soft skills content. And that authentic style and humanistic approach of your work really hit the spot with us in our sector. And I personally absolutely loved your recent book as well, because although I'm not unionised at LSN, my background is I've worked in heavily unionised organisations. So I really like to keep in touch with what's going on in the ER field. So I found that was a really good resource for us. We use Daniel Barnett for our employment law resources, and I would encourage anyone who is not familiar with Daniel Barnett to check out his website, www.danielbarnett.com. And our MD encouraged myself and all of the SMT to spend time each week reading what's going on in the world and just grow a feel for macroeconomic factors. So I myself subscribe to The Economist, and I like to keep up to speed with global developments that way. But I filter out social media for the most part. I don't watch much TV. I make sure that I do at least an hour a day outside in nature to clear my head. And I jog. I promote fitness socials at work. As I've mentioned, we've done several, 26-mile hikes, coastal walks, mountain walks to bring people together, doing a bit of a personal activity. So I think that helps people rebalance after a busy working week. So I'm not inward facing. I have a small but extremely helpful network. And I've had people who have mentored me in the past, which has been fantastic. And I do some work helping other organisations as well. So that helps to keep my thinking broader than manufacturing. So in short, I think being focused and disciplined with the things that will make a difference to your particular business are paramount, and filter out anything that will not, because, life is just so busy for people. We get bombarded, we get information overload. And I think having that discipline to filter that out is really the first step. Self-care is key to keep your mind fresh, and networking is very important. And I know your role is very different to mine, Joe. Yours is very much cross-organisational and much more about networking and people interactions. How do you manage your time to best effect?
I think that's a really, really important point. And the longer I've worked in HR, the more important networking is. It's opening up ideas, sharing good practice, sharing learning. In fact, I was just messaging a friend this morning about the coaching qualification that I did. So having that support network is fantastic from that point of view. But I think it's also really important when those issues come in on a Friday afternoon and you sort of just want to talk to someone and say, oh, have you dealt with this before? The apprentices taking cocaine at the residential, whatever it is, there's always something that's great to have some level-headed colleagues such as yourself to be able to call up and go, what do you think about this? And as a contractor and being self-employed, it's really important because you don't always have that network close to you. And I imagine that's probably similar for yourself as the standalone sort of HR person in the SME to be able to draw on that network, but also, identifying opportunities for work, working together with people. And that's one of the fantastic things about this podcast is we get to talk about some of your experiences and our common hopes and aspirations for the future of HR.
Yeah, absolutely. And our MD constantly says you have to fit your own oxygen mask before you can fit that of others. I'm pretty sure he's stolen that from somewhere, but I think it's right. It's absolutely right. If you haven't got self-care, then you're not going to have a fresh mind. And if you are depleted in your own resources, then your cup of milk of human kindness gets diminished. So I think that's absolutely right.
And that really nicely links into the final question that I've got to sort of help us wrap up. And, when you're at your best, it helps you looking forward and being excited about the future. And that, for me, there's lots happening at the moment and there's lots of challenges in the external environment. But what are the things that are exciting you about the future of HR in the UK?
Well, obviously, the main opportunity is AI. I think using AI to take away the drudge, to allow people to spend more time on deep work, quality work, and those people interactions. I'm also fascinated by how societal factors spill over into the workplace, and we will see challenges and opportunities from economic factors such as EDI shifts, welfare changes in the coming years. And then there's the Employment Rights Act coming down the line, which will change the employment landscape, and that will bring opportunities and threats for SMEs. And I think that's probably worthy of a deep dive all on its own.
And I think that's where we hope to take this, Deb, is look at some of these big challenges. And I think the practical elements that we've talked about, the real life focus that you've brought is going to be really helpful for people listening to this and thinking, what can I do differently on Monday morning to try and help support people that I'm working with? So that's brings us to the end of the first podcast. So thank you very much for your contributions and support with this, Deb. It's
Pleasure.
really important note to finish on, I think, about the excitement for the future. But some of those things probably open up discussions that we can focus on in future episodes of this podcast. Thank you again. I think you've been a fantastic advocate for HR and really helped us to get under the skin of how that works in an SME environment. And as we move forward, we'll be looking at more of those challenges, but also some of the practical solutions. You can find more about Deb on LinkedIn. You can find out more about me and Across the Table on LinkedIn and Substack as well. We'll include some links in the comments below. And I think the last couple of points to say from my point of view is that we're aiming to build something that's practical and useful for HR practitioners and managers. And it really helps if you hit subscribe to this, listen to these podcasts, but also follow the newsletters that we've got. So thank you for listening. And we look forward to continuing these practical conversations, building trust, resolving issues, and ultimately improving the experience of work for everyone. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.